My husband cheated on me with my own stepsister, then threw me a party to announce she was pregnant with his child. His sister helped me expose their sick secret. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. You know, it's funny how a life can be split into a before and an after. A single moment, a single revelation, can become a wall separating everything you thought you knew from the harsh reality you have to live with. For me, that wall was built on my 36th birthday. But the story, the real story, with all its tiny cracks and hidden fault lines, started years earlier, in a time of grief. Losing a parent leaves you feeling incredibly isolated and empty, as anyone who's been through it knows. When my father passed away, it felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I remember standing in his empty house a week after the funeral, the silence just screaming at me. I'd pick up the phone to call him about something silly I saw on TV, my thumb hovering over his contact, before the crushing weight of reality would settle back in. I was 28, working as a personal assistant, and just trying to keep my head above water in a world that suddenly felt muted, like the color had been drained out of everything. My family life was complicated. My mom and dad had divorced years before he got sick, and she had remarried a few years later. Her new husband, Robert, was a decent enough guy, but he came with a daughter, my stepsister, Cassandra. Cassie. We were about the same age, but that's where the similarities ended. From day one, we were like oil and water. I remember one of our first family dinners together. I was talking about a small promotion I got at work. Before my mom could even congratulate me, Cassie let out this little, condescending laugh. "Oh, a personal assistant getting a promotion," she'd said, twirling her fork in her pasta. "Do you get to schedule even more important people's lunches now?" The table went quiet. That was Cassie. All sharp edges, sly comments, and a constant need to make me feel small. That whole side of the family felt like a house I was visiting, not a home I belonged to. I was in a really tough spot emotionally, just adrift. Then along came Gregory. He walked into my life like a character out of a movie. I was at a charity gala my boss had dragged me to, feeling completely out of place, when this charming, handsome older man approached me. He had kind eyes and a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We started talking, and he just got it. He didn't offer empty platitudes about my dad, instead, he asked me about him. He had me telling him stories, laughing at memories I thought were buried under layers of sadness. He was everything I was looking for, safe, reliable, and affectionate. Our courtship was a whirlwind. He took me on these amazing dates, treating me like a true gentleman, always opening doors, always listening with his full attention. On our third date, I mentioned offhand that my favorite flower was a stargazer lily. The next day, a huge bouquet of them arrived at my office. It was those little things. He made me feel seen. My mom, of course, absolutely loved him. She saw him as the stability I so desperately needed, the calm harbor after the storm of grief. When I met his family, his parents were warm and welcoming. But his sister, Beatrice, B, as I quickly came to call her, she was something special. We met at a Sunday barbecue at his parents' house. While Gregory was off talking business with his dad, B and I found ourselves by the dessert table, bonding over our shared love for lemon meringue pie. We just clicked. We became incredibly close, talking on the phone for hours, going shopping, grabbing lunch. She became the sister I had always wished for but never had, the complete opposite of the prickly relationship I had with Cassie. I remember telling her once, over salads, "You know, I'm so grateful I have you in my life because of Gregory." And I meant it with my whole heart. We were still deeply immersed in our lovey-dovey phase when he spontaneously decided to propose. He had completely caught me off guard with a surprise engagement party at our favorite restaurant, with all our loved ones there. Without much hesitation, I said yes. I can still vividly recall the smiles on the faces of our families as they kept raving about how Gregory and I were made for each other. I admit, for a long time, I wholeheartedly believed it too. Our wedding was beautiful, and for our honeymoon, we spent 2 glorious weeks in Mexico, disconnected from the world. It felt like the perfect start to our forever. It was only when we returned home, to the mundane reality of merging two lives, that the first tiny, almost invisible cracks began to appear in the perfect facade. The first challenge was moving into his place. And that's what it was, his place. He owned the house, and he had lived there for 10 years. Every single object had its own history, its own designated spot. The walls were a sterile beige, the furniture was dark, heavy, and imposing. There was no clutter, no personality, just order. I remember bringing in a box with my favorite colorful throw pillows and a quirky lamp I'd owned since college. I placed one of the pillows on the sofa, and it was like a splash of life in a black and white photo. Gregory came home that evening, saw the pillow, and his smile tightened just a fraction. "What's this?" he asked. "Just trying to make the place feel a little more like us," I said cheerfully. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands. "Honey, it's a nice pillow, but it doesn't really go with the aesthetic, does it? The house is perfect as it is. Why mess with perfection?" He said it gently, but it wasn't a suggestion. I quietly took the pillow and put it back in the box. Then came the issue with my wardrobe. He opened his closet, a meticulously organized space with suits on one side and shirts color-coded on the other. He then looked at the 10+ boxes of my clothes piled in the hallway. "Audrey," he said, with a sigh that made me feel instantly extravagant and foolish. "Nobody in their right mind needs so many clothes." I tried to explain. "Well, this is my work stuff, these are my casual weekend clothes, this box has dresses for special occasions." Each item held a memory, a part of my story. But to him, it was just clutter. He insisted I needed to downsize, that he wasn't willing to give up more than a small sliver of his closet. I spent a whole weekend trying to sort and purge, but it felt like I was throwing away parts of myself. In the end, I gave up. I decided to take over the guest room closet. I told myself it was a practical solution, my own little walk-in space. But every morning, walking into a separate room to get dressed, it felt like a physical representation of the parts of me that weren't welcome in our shared life. The final straw in that initial period was my fridge magnets. I had a whole collection, a little cable car from San Francisco, a bright blue Evil Eye from a trip to Greece with friends, a miniature Eiffel Tower. They were my small, colorful reminders of the adventures I'd had, of the person I was before him. One afternoon, I was happily arranging them on the stainless steel fridge when Gregory walked in. He watched me for a moment before saying, "What are you doing?" "Just putting up my magnets," I said. He walked over and picked one off, holding it between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a dead insect. "Audrey, these are tacky. They're cheap-looking. They just clutter up the clean look of the kitchen." "But they're my memories, Greg," I argued, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "They make me happy. Let's not start our marriage on rocky ground over a few pieces of plastic," he urged, his tone gentle but unyielding. "There are better ways to display memories." So, I reluctantly agreed. I took each magnet off the fridge, the little clicks of them detaching sounding like tiny heartbreaks. I packed them away in a box and stored them in the garage. Little did I know, that garage would become a graveyard for the parts of me he wanted to erase. During this time, he'd sometimes make strange, offhand comments comparing me to my stepsister. If I bought a dress he thought was a little too bright, he'd say, "You don't want to look cheap, like your sister Cassie, do you?" He said it like a joke, but it wasn't funny. It was a subtle way of putting me down while also reminding me of the family drama I'd tried so hard to escape. For the first 2 years, we found a rhythm. I kept my social life, he kept his. We had our date nights. It felt balanced enough that I could ignore the little red flags. But in the 3rd year of our marriage, something fundamental shifted in him, and the ground beneath my feet began to feel unstable. We were having dinner one night, a quiet Tuesday. I was telling him a funny story about a mishap at work when he suddenly cut me off. "You know, Audrey," he said, staring at me with an intensity that felt new. I was thinking, I want to be a father. I put my fork down, the piece of chicken halfway to my mouth. What? Greg, we've talked about this 100 times. We both agreed we didn't want children. It had been one of our foundational agreements. We loved our freedom, our ability to travel on a whim, our quiet weekends with the Sunday paper. He brushed it off as if our years of conversation meant nothing. People change their minds. I'm getting older. I want a family. I want to see you with a pregnant belly. I think you'd be a beautiful mother. His words made me feel extremely uncomfortable. It wasn't a discussion, it was a declaration. From that day on, it became his singular focus, an obsession. The topic came up constantly. We'd be at a park and he'd point to a family and say, "That could be us." He'd bring it up late at night, whispering about baby names in the dark. It started to feel less like a dream and more like a pressure campaign. Then it got worse. He started forgetting to use a condom. The first time, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. The second time, it was a fight. He'd say things like, "It just feels better, honey," or the ultimate guilt trip, "Don't you trust me?" Each time, it became a tense negotiation, a fight that left me feeling anxious and violated in my own bed. I tried to have serious conversations with him. Why the sudden change, Greg? What is this really about? His answers were always vague and centered on controlling my life. I just think it would make our marriage perfect. Once you're pregnant, you could give up your job. Your salary is just a drop in the bucket anyway. You could focus on our family, on the home. The thought of losing my job, my financial independence, my connection to the outside world, terrified me. This wasn't a shared dream, it was his decree for my life. I felt trapped. I knew a lot of people might not agree with what I did next, but I felt I had no choice. I made a secret appointment with my gynecologist. I remember sitting in the waiting room, my hands clammy, feeling like a criminal. I had a calm, quiet conversation with my doctor, and I left with a prescription for birth control pills. That night, taking that first tiny pill felt like a monumental act of rebellion, a secret I held close to protect my own body and future. With the pregnancy issue secretly handled, I thought things might calm down. I was wrong. It was as if his inability to control that one aspect of my life made him clamp down on everything else. His erratic behavior went into overdrive. He started questioning me relentlessly about my social life. If I was going out for dinner with my girlfriends, it was an interrogation. Who exactly is going to be there? Where are you going? What time will you be home? Then he started policing my clothes. It became a nightly ritual. I'd get ready to go out, even just to a casual movie with B, and he would stand in the doorway of the bedroom, arms crossed, and critique my outfit. One evening, I was wearing a simple, dark blue blouse with a jacket. He looked me up and down, his brow furrowed. "You should probably cover up more," he said. "That neckline is a little low, don't you think?" "I'm just concerned about what other guys might think when they see you." I was so taken aback. "It's a normal blouse, Greg. I'm going out with your sister." "It doesn't matter," he'd insist. "You're a married woman. You need to present yourself with respect." It became more and more aggressive. He would literally make me change, sometimes 2 or 3 times, until I was wearing something he deemed appropriate, usually something frumpy and shapeless that made me feel like I was 20 years older. It made me feel uncomfortable and unsure, like I was walking on eggshells in my own home, in my own skin. A few weeks after that, I started noticing that some of my favorite clothes were missing. Not just any clothes, but the specific ones he'd made comments about before, a particularly nice red dress, a silk top I loved. Initially, I thought I was going crazy. I turned the house upside down, checking laundry baskets, the back of the closet, even my car. When I asked Gregory, he feigned complete ignorance. I have no idea, honey. Are you sure you didn't lend them to someone? But I knew I hadn't. Then one day, I was looking for our old Christmas decorations in the garage. Behind a stack of boxes, I saw it. A plain brown shoebox. On a whim, I opened it. There they were. My missing clothes, crumpled up and stuffed inside. I was furious. I carried the box into the living room and dropped it on the coffee table with a thud that echoed in the silent house. Explain this, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt in years. He tried to deny it, but his eyes darted away. I have no idea how those got there. Don't lie to me, Gregory. It's just the two of us in this house. Finally, he admitted it. He had hidden them to prevent me from wearing them. And his justification was utterly appalling. I was just trying to save your face, he said, as if he were my father, not my husband. Girls who dress up like that are often labeled as characterless or easy by guys. I completely lost my temper. You've gone insane. I yelled, my voice cracking. You have no right to determine what I can or cannot wear. I have been married to you for 3 years and I have never, ever been disloyal. Why would you care so much about what other men think? He eventually apologized, giving his usual excuses about stress and being overly protective. Because this was the most bizarre and controlling thing he had ever done, a part of me wanted to believe it was a one-off, a temporary lapse in sanity. So, I let it go. But I was wrong. It just kept getting worse. The next phase of his control was more insidious, more technologically savvy. I began to notice that messages from my friends and family were mysteriously disappearing from my phone. At first, it was small things. My mom would mention a text she sent that I never received. I'd chalk it up to bad service. Then, a close friend was planning a surprise birthday party for another friend in our circle. She called me, excited, and said, "Okay, I'm sending you the group chat invitation right now. Don't say anything to Sarah." I waited. Nothing came through. The next day, she called again, annoyed. "Audrey, why didn't you accept the invite? Are you coming or not?" I explained I never got it. It wasn't until the party that she showed me on her phone, she had indeed sent it. It was just, gone on my end. It was strange and deeply unsettling. I started to feel paranoid, isolated. Was I going crazy? I did everything I could think of. I updated my phone's software. I deleted and reinstalled my messaging apps. Nothing worked. I finally came to the conclusion that my phone must have been hacked or had a serious virus. I decided the only solution was to buy a new one. I'm an emotional hoarder, so I didn't want to sell my old phone. I just put it in my desk drawer, thinking maybe one day I could get the pictures off it. Throughout this whole ordeal, I had been sharing these strange occurrences with Gregory, and he would put on a great show of being just as puzzled as I was, shaking his head and saying, "That's so weird, honey." The day I bought my new phone, I was so busy that I didn't even think to mention it to him right away. I got home late, put it on my bedside table to charge, and fell into an exhausted sleep. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m., my mouth completely dry. I got up to get a glass of water. As I walked through the dark hallway into the living room, my eyes slowly adjusted to the gloom, and I saw a shape on the sofa. My heart leaped into my throat. It was Gregory. He was crouched over the coffee table, a faint glow illuminating his face. In his hands were both phones, my old one and my brand new one. He was swiping through my messages. The sight was so shocking, so violating, that I couldn't contain myself. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked, my voice slicing through the silence of the house. He jumped like he'd been electrocuted, dropping the phones onto the sofa cushions. He spun around, his face a mask of panic in the dim light. His words came out in a jumbled, defensive torrent, and his first instinct was to attack. Clearly you're the one who's cheating, since you bought another phone without asking me, he snarled, his voice a harsh whisper. He stood up and started pacing, launching into a rant about how he should have never trusted me, how secretive I was being. I just stood there, my initial shock turning into a cold, hard anger, as I watched him try to twist this back on me. When he finally ran out of steam, I spoke, my voice dangerously calm. I told you about the problems with my old phone for weeks, Greg. I just bought the new one today. I haven't even finished setting it up yet. You could have just waited for me to mention it. The next morning, the tension in the house was so thick you could cut it with a knife. He tried to act like nothing had happened, but I wasn't letting it go. Over breakfast, I asked him again, what were you doing with both my phones in your hand in the middle of the night? He tried to look sheepish, avoiding my gaze as he stirred his coffee. I couldn't sleep, he mumbled. I saw the new phone and was just curious. Then I was just checking the old one to see if I could find any bugs you might have missed. It was such a pathetic lie. I got up, snatched my phones from the counter where he'd left them, and saw that he had my chat history open on the old phone. A realization, cold and sickening, washed over me. It was him. It was Gregory who had been deleting my messages all along. I looked at him, my expression blank. Have you been deleting my messages from my phone? He became agitated, his voice rising. That's an absurd thing to even ask me. I would never do something like that. You're being paranoid, Audrey. But I had him. You are going through my messages in the middle of the night, Greg, I said, my voice unwavering. You have no stance to deny it. You have been actively isolating me from my friends and family. Why? It felt like a betrayal on so many levels. He was engineering my loneliness. I couldn't even look at him anymore. I felt utterly disgusted. Trusting my gut for the first time in a long time, I walked into our bedroom and pulled a suitcase out of the closet. What are you doing? He asked, following me. You've crossed a line, I told him, my voice cold and steady as I threw clothes into the bag. I need some space. I'm going to my mom's. He started pleading, begging me not to leave. It was only when I had my hand on the front doorknob that he finally cracked. He broke down, admitting everything. He had been deleting my messages. And his twisted reason? I just did it so I could spend more time with you. The justification was so insane, so manipulative, that it solidified my resolve. I opened the door without another word and walked out, leaving him standing there alone in the house he so desperately wanted to turn into my prison. The drive to my mom's house was a blur. I was crying so hard I could barely see the road. When I finally arrived and explained everything to her, she was shocked. She agreed that what he had done was deeply strange. But then she said something that made me feel more alone than ever. But Audrey, you're fortunate to have a husband who still loves you so deeply after all these years, even if his actions were misguided. It was the classic response from a generation that valued marriage above all else, even a woman's sanity. The next few days were a special kind of hell. Gregory called and texted relentlessly. The messages were a roller coaster of emotions. One minute he was apologizing profusely, the next he was blaming me for being distant and making him insecure. I finally just switched my phone off. I tried to distract myself by helping my mom in the garden, weeding and planting, trying to bring some order to at least one small patch of the world. I was confused, hurt, and too dense to admit to myself that this was more than just a rough patch. Then, B showed up. Her arrival was like a breath of fresh air. She was just as disturbed as I was to hear what her brother had been doing. She didn't make excuses for him. She sat with me on my mom's porch swing and listened. No husband should wake up in the middle of the night to check his wife's phone, Audrey, she said, her voice firm. Especially when you've never done anything to make him suspicious. His behavior isn't loving, it's sick. Something is seriously wrong here. She promised she would talk to him, try to get to the bottom of what was going on. I felt a surge of gratitude for her. She was my anchor in this storm. Feeling a bit stronger after our talk, I switched my phone back on. The messages from Gregory had taken a dark turn. He sounded like a different person, angry and cruel. In one of them, he even threatened to file for divorce and make sure I was left with nothing, a nasty jab about my father that was designed to hurt me. I was shocked by the venom. I noticed there were no new messages that day, and a foolish part of me hoped he had come to his senses. 2 days later, Bday called me. Her voice was tight, strained. "Audrey, I have some news, and you're not going to like it." She came over a little while later. She looked like she had been crying. She didn't say much at first, just handed me her phone. On the screen were several pictures, clearly taken from a parked car, zoomed in on the front door of my house. In the pictures, a young blonde woman was using a key to let herself in. My heart stopped. It wasn't just any woman. I recognized her immediately, even from a distance. The cheap, bleached hair. The way she held her shoulders with a defiant slouch. It was my stepsister, Cassandra. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. I just shook my head, a silent, desperate no, as Bday explained that she had been so worried after my call that she had driven by the house. She'd seen Cassie's car there 2 days in a row. "I suspect my brother is having an affair with your stepsister," she said, her own voice filled with a mixture of disgust and sorrow. My body started to shake uncontrollably. I felt like I was going to be sick. Bday tried to put an arm around me, but I flinched away and ran to the bathroom, gagging over the toilet. The world was spinning. My mind raced, trying to find any other explanation. Maybe she was just there to check on the house. Maybe she was talking to Gregory for me, trying to mediate. But the image of her using a key, walking in like she owned the place, it was undeniable. I stumbled out of the bathroom, my face pale. My mom and Bday were looking at me with such pity in their eyes that it made me feel nauseous all over again. I tried to laugh it off, my voice sounding shrill and hysterical. "It's probably nothing. Maybe she's just watering the plants." No one said anything. The silence was the answer. And then, the dam broke. The tears came, hot and furious. It was a deep, gut-wrenching sob for my failed marriage, for the double-barreled betrayal from my husband and a member of my own fractured family. My mom and Bday just sat with me on the floor, rubbing my back, letting me cry it all out. When the tears finally subsided, my mom's expression had hardened. "I am so sorry, sweetheart," she said, her voice filled with a new steeliness. "I was wrong. This isn't love. This is monstrous. We are going to find you the best divorce lawyer in the state." Bday agreed. "I'm going to find out more about this," she promised. "He's not going to get away with it." That night, I couldn't sleep. The realization slowly cemented itself in my mind: the love of my life had cheated on me with my own stepsister. All of Gregory's controlling behavior, his paranoia, his sudden obsession with getting me pregnant, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. He wasn't afraid of me cheating, he was projecting his own guilt. He wanted to lock me down, get me pregnant and jobless, so I'd be trapped when he eventually decided to leave me for her. It was a long, calculated, sickening plan. The next morning, I woke up, and the sadness had been replaced by a cold, hard rage. If he thought he could destroy my life and I would just crumble, he was in for a very big surprise. I was going to file for divorce, and I was going to take everything he ever owned. The weeks that followed were a blur of calculated action. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but it was now fueled by a burning anger that gave me focus. My mom and I spent hours researching, finally finding a divorce lawyer who was known for being a shark. At our first meeting, a stern woman named Ms. Albright, she laid it all out. "We need irrefutable proof. I recommend hiring a private investigator." Hiring a PI was expensive, but I didn't care. It felt like an investment in my own justice. Throughout this period, Gregory only messaged me twice. The messages were dripping with an arrogance that was breathtaking. The first said, "Had enough of your little vacation yet?" The second one, a week later, simply said, "Are you ready to apologize to me yet?" I saved them both as evidence and didn't reply. I knew that any response would tip him off, and I wanted the element of surprise. I wanted to see the look on his face when I served him the papers. The PI, a quiet man named Mr. Harris, was incredibly efficient. Within a week, he had a file for me. He confirmed that Gregory and Cassandra were meeting up almost every day. Sometimes at our house, sometimes at cheap motels on the edge of town. It wasn't a new fling. The evidence suggested this had been going on for at least a year. A whole year of lies, right under my nose. B, feeling her own sense of familial betrayal, did her own digging. She was a master of the internet sleuth. She and I met for coffee, and she slid a piece of paper across the table. "You need to see this," she said. She had found out that Cassie had a history I knew nothing about. Nothing criminal, but a pattern of destructive behavior, of latching onto older, successful men. It painted a picture of a deeply insecure person who got a thrill from blowing up other people's lives. Armed with all of this information, we decided it was time to bring in the final players, Gregory's parents. B arranged a meeting at their house. I sat on their pristine sofa, the same one where they had celebrated our engagement, and I laid out the whole sordid story. I showed them the PI's photos, the timelines. At first, they were in disbelief. Gregory had been feeding them a steady diet of lies, telling them we were just going through a rough patch. As the evidence mounted, their disbelief turned to fury. Gregory's mother started to cry, not for her son, but for me. She hugged me tightly. "We are absolutely disgusted, Audrey," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "He is not the man we raised. It was in that living room that we hatched our plan. A plan to catch him red-handed, to strip him of all his lies in front of everyone. And the perfect stage for this drama was just a few days away, my birthday. The plan was audacious, and it was theatrical, and it was exactly what I needed." Gregory's dad, a man of few words but immense authority, took charge. He called Gregory right then and there, putting him on speakerphone. "Gregory," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Your mother and I were just talking. We feel we haven't celebrated as a family in a while. You should throw a big birthday party for Audrey this year. A proper celebration." Gregory stammered on the other end of the line. "Oh, Dad, I don't know. Things are a bit tense. I don't think she'd want that." He was trying to slither his way out of it, to maintain the fiction that this was just a small disagreement. But his dad was ready for him. "Nonsense. I've already talked to Audrey, and she told me she would absolutely love it. She's looking forward to it. Don't disappoint your wife and your mother, son." There was a long pause on the other end. Gregory was trapped. He eventually agreed, his voice tight with an irritation he couldn't hide. Throughout the entire conversation, he never once mentioned that I wasn't even living with him, that our marriage was a smoldering ruin. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a message from him. "My parents seem to think a party is a good idea. I'm hoping you can attend for their sake and we can just be civil." I typed back my reply, my fingers steady. "That's so thoughtful of you, Greg. I'd be happy to attend." On the day of my 36th birthday, I got ready with a strange sense of calm. I chose a simple, elegant black dress, a dress he had never seen. In my coat pocket, I had the file from the PI and the freshly printed divorce papers. My heart was pounding, a steady drumbeat of dread and anticipation. This was it. The final act. When my mother and I arrived at the house, Gregory opened the door. He didn't hug me. He barely made eye contact, just offered a dry, tight smile. "Glad you could make it." We walked in, and the scene was almost comically pathetic. He had made the absolute minimum effort. A few sad, gray balloons were taped randomly to the walls. The living room was cluttered and hadn't been vacuumed. In the kitchen, the sink was piled high with dirty dishes. For the grand birthday feast, he had ordered a stack of greasy takeaway pizza boxes, which now sat getting cold on the counter. It was the saddest, most insulting party I had ever seen. His parents arrived shortly after, playing their roles as the happy, oblivious in-laws perfectly. They greeted me with warm hugs, pointedly ignoring their son's sullen mood. Then Bea arrived, carrying a brightly wrapped gift, her eyes giving me a quick, supportive glance. We all sat down, making strained small talk about the weather and sports, the tension in the room so thick you could taste it. We ate the cold pizza off paper plates. We cut my birthday cake. They sang happy birthday, and it sounded like a funeral dirge. And then, right on cue, the doorbell rang. A flicker of something, panic? Excitement, crossed Gregory's face. He practically ran to open it. He walked back in, and he wasn't alone. He was holding Cassandra's hand. She was wearing a short, skimpy, glittery dress and sky-high heels, a triumphant smirk plastered on her face as she looked around at all of us. She was practically glowing with the thrill of it all. Gregory ignored me completely, leading Cassie over to his parents like he was presenting a prize. "Mom, Dad," he began loudly, his voice filled with a rehearsed sincerity. "There's something I've been wanting to announce for a long time, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity." He took a deep breath, positioning himself and Cassie in the center of the room, as if they were on a stage. "No one knows this," he started, his voice dripping with self-pity, "but I have been deeply unhappy in my marriage for a long time. Audrey, she abused me emotionally. She never took my feelings into consideration. She would gaslight me, manipulate me. She was never a good wife to me." I just stared at him, my blood turning to ice. The audacity was breathtaking. He continued, gaining momentum. "I recently found out that she has been cheating on me. I caught her with a secret second phone. After I confronted her about it, she walked out on me." He paused for dramatic effect, looking around at the silent, stunned faces of his parents. "If it wasn't for Cassandra," he said, squeezing her hand, "I don't think I could have survived the last few months. 6 months ago, our paths crossed, and one thing led to another. She made me realize just how badly I'd been treated." He then announced that since I had left, he and Cassie had been spending more and more time together, falling in love. And then he delivered the final, twisted blow. He placed a hand on Cassie's flat stomach. "And recently," he declared, his eyes shining with a sickening pride, "we found out that she is even 2 months pregnant." My eyes widened. I glanced at Bea, her mouth was hanging open. He wasn't just having an affair, he was trying to replace me entirely, to build a new family on the ashes of our marriage. He finished his speech by saying how I had failed as a woman, but he was lucky enough to find Cassie, and he hoped his parents could find it in their hearts to accept her. My mother, who had been sitting rigid with fury, finally snapped. She stood up, picked up a full glass of Sprite from the coffee table, and with a surprisingly steady hand, threw the entire contents right in Gregory's face. "You are a piece of garbage," she screamed, her voice shaking with rage. Soda dripped from his hair and down his stunned face. Cassie looked terrified. Before Gregory could even react, Bea was on her feet. "Your game is up, Gregory," she yelled, her voice ringing through the room. We all know you've been having an affair with her." The room exploded into chaos. I knew, in that perfect moment of mayhem, that it was my time. I calmly stood up, walked over to my coat, and took out the file. I walked across the room, past his shouting mother and crying sister, and placed the divorce papers on the table right in front of him. "I'm done," I told him, my voice triumphantly clear over the noise. "And now that you've publicly admitted to having an affair, I'm coming for everything you own." My mother and I walked out of that house, leaving the screaming and the crying and the wreckage behind us. I didn't look back. As we got in the car, a strange sense of peace washed over me. It was over. The lies were out. In the car, my mom reached over and took my hand. "I am so proud of the strong woman I raised," she said, tears in her eyes. And for the first time in a long time, I felt it too. If you're still listening, could you do me a huge favor and like this video, and comment the number 1 down below? That way, I'll know you gave me a like, and I'll know you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a massive encouragement for me, it really keeps me going. So please, comment the number 1, and let me tell you what happened next. The aftermath was exactly as chaotic as you'd imagine. My phone blew up with calls and texts from Gregory. They were a pathetic mix of rage, begging, and blaming. I woke up the next morning to nearly 80 messages, each one more desperate than the last. He promised he would change, that he was ready for couples counseling, that he couldn't live without me. For a fleeting moment, my heart felt a pang of sadness for the man I thought I had married. But then my brain took over, reminding me that man had never really existed. I didn't reply to a single message. The divorce process was a long, frustrating battle. His lawyer, a carbon copy of Gregory himself, tried every trick in the book to drag it out and paint me as the villain. They argued I shouldn't get anything. But I had my own shark, Ms. Albright, and more importantly, I had receipts. I had bank statements showing my contributions to the mortgage. I had invoices for the renovations I had paid for, including the thousands of dollars I spent turning the damp, unfinished basement into his precious man cave. I had grocery bills from years of being the one to stock our pantry. My lawyer and I were determined to get every penny I was owed. Throughout it all, Bea and Gregory's parents were my staunchest allies. They were my character witnesses. They cut Gregory off financially until the divorce was settled. I met up with Bea for coffee every few weeks, and she was my lifeline. About 6 months into the process, she gave me some happy news of her own: she was engaged. She insisted that she wanted me at her wedding, no matter what. "You are my family, Audrey," she'd said. She also gave me the final update on the Gregory and Cassandra saga. Apparently, their twisted fantasy couldn't survive the harsh light of reality. Under the combined pressure of the family's disgust and the looming legal battle, their relationship imploded. Cassie, apparently, admitted that she had been sleeping with multiple men and that there was no guarantee the baby was even his. She packed her bags and disappeared, presumably to find her next victim. Gregory was devastated, left with nothing but the consequences of his own actions. I have to admit, hearing that didn't make me sad at all. Finally, after nearly a year of fighting, the end came. Gregory's parents delivered the final blow. They sat him down and told him that if he didn't sign the papers and agree to my terms, they would write him out of their will completely. The threat of losing his future inheritance was the one thing that finally got through to him. In the end, he agreed to give me everything I had asked for. I remember the day I got the call from Ms. Albright telling me it was officially over. I hung up the phone and just stood in my kitchen, silent. Then, I started to laugh. A real, deep, belly laugh of pure relief. I am divorced. I am free. It's been a long, dark road, but I'm here. I survived. And I'm ready for my after. Tonight, I'm going out with my friends, and with Bea, to celebrate. Not the end of something, but the beginning. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. If you've been through something similar, or if you just want to share your thoughts, please leave a comment below. It truly helps to know that we're not alone in these struggles. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. You all stay strong.